if we could start down the other end, we do a quick introduction, a quick 2 minutes, no longer, of just where you are and what you do. Should we start down the panel?
Hi everyone, Catherine Porter. I work for Hilton, and my role with Hilton is looking after our youth strategy, so all our youth programmes, which are community youth programmes and also employment youth programmes across Europe, Middle East and Africa.
Thank you, Catherine. Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard James from Nationwide. My role is in digital technology, particularly around growing the new workforces that we are looking to re-insource technologists. So a large retraining occupation, thinking about attracting, retaining, retraining talent from a wide range of different disciplines and walks of life, and supporting our above-the-line statement about building society nationwide.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Catherine McCabe. I'm currently a CEO of a startup, a tech startup, but previous to that I spent 30 years in retail, so on the other side, so I now sell to retailers. But very much, really passionate about how digital can really change retail, enable retail, and I didn't come from a coding background, so I sometimes feel a bit of an imposter, but I did come from the shop floor and I kind of understood exactly what was needed and fell into IT halfway through my career and never looked back because I was always fascinated about how it could really help to really change ways of working and mindset.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julian Burnett. I lead IBM's business here in the UK for retail, consumer products, travel and transport. It's a fairly sizable, complex business, but I've only been at it a year, before which I spent a lot of my time doing similar roles to Cathy in the retail industry. And core to what I've been doing probably for the last 30 years is how to create technology capability at a time of transformational change in big business and small business. And a central tenet of everything I've done has been around people and skills and creating high-performing teams, dynamic operating models for technology functions, particularly at times of significant uptick in investments in digital and technology-enabled business programs.
I'm Diana Lindberg. I'm the director of the Oxford Brookes Global MBA, which is a globally distributed executive program. My academic domain is information systems, so I straddle a good few worlds there, which hopefully will be quite useful here.
Okay, perfect. So what we'd like to do, I think, just for the final session, is to combine both the things that we've been talking about today. So we've been talking about diversity, and the more diverse the input, the more diverse the team, the better the outcome. But also we've laced that in with some fairly sizable technology challenges with regards to the tech itself, things like AI, machine learning, all the rest of it. And what we've done is we've discovered that you can go from a discussion around, help desk, through to sort of undermining Western liberal democracy as we understand it through use of platforms and all the rest of it. And that used to be too far-fetched. And now actually what we're trying to do is get people talent, capability, skills and knowledge into organisations so that they can grow and thrive amongst all these different digital challenges. But where do we find them? How do we train them? How do we attain and retain those skills and assets within an organisation? And has what government has done recently with regards to apprenticeships and other models, has that helped or hindered people's challenge in trying to do that? So that's the big stuff that we want to try and cover in 14 minutes. So who feels up for the challenge? I saw Richard rubbing his hands there, so we'll go with Richard first.
So from my perspective, this really does come back to a conversation around being able to attract and retain the interest of those who believe in a purpose. So for me, back at Nationwide Building Society, I really am pushing hard on the opportunity to support an organisation who are owned by a member base, who are there for a purpose around helping people into their first homes. And actually I'm looking to attract that talent then with the intention of helping them solve problems that will help society. And whether that be then about folk in contact centres who to date may well have to deal with unpleasant, clunky old systems. Mm-hmm. And they do that sort of swan analogy thing of, I have colleagues in the contact centre in the branch making our poor systems okay. And if I offer the opportunity to act as a hero or heroine from their contact centre to come in and be fully retrained and support the creation of new systems and software that can afford their colleagues in the future the ability to support the member base better, I'm finding so far that so long as there's a purpose, so long as there's a belief system, as long as you can sort of imbue psychological safety and give them that opportunity, reward all the successes, celebrate the learnings. To date, we've had some reasonable successes, and it is mainly about purpose and about giving folk that sense of sort of yes, we can, and we're here to support you.
Purpose has become something of a catch-all. Lots of people are talking about it. It started sort of Simon Sinek and all that kind of stuff, and it's going from there. Does anyone else find that it's the why that people want to get involved with organisations as a driving force as to recruitment?
Yeah, I think definitely. Obviously, working for quite a small startup, so there's we're just under 20 at the moment, and a lot of what we're doing is we put people and purpose first as part of our ethos in terms of the company. We've got people who are reskilling, that are coming and learning different skills to, in terms of their career change. We've also got remote workers. There's a real change in how people are working. And that really plays into the core of what we actually do as a business, which is, helping brands to get closer to their customers. And I think it's a real interesting place, I think, because, in terms of the workforce and skills changing, there's this mixture of people not just having specific roles now, and particularly where it's almost like multifaceted roles where, they're not a PM or a BA or in terms of, a specific role. They actually have multifunctional roles and they can do a bit of both. So if they've come...
Is that really a challenge in itself? I think one of the things we've identified at BCS is the amount of people who self-identify as IT professional. Mm-hmm. If everyone that you wanted to recruit self-identified already as an IT professional subset, DevOps or whatever, the world would be quite an easy place to recruit from and also to skill and train. Is that helping us? Well, absolutely. So how's that playing out?
Well, no, because I think in our experience, we find that even with, if our devs have got experience of actually working in retail and then have reskilled and actually trained up, then they're absolutely, they're the best. They understand the problems and can really then not just develop the solutions, but they can actually also speak to the retailers and they're not kind of hidden away, behind the scenes. That, it's a really useful ecosystem to drive that. It takes a specific mindset, and I think we're very focused on that. But I'm seeing it more and more in the corporates as well that we work with. It's a really important part of building the skills and driving those through.
So I'll come this end for a different perspective, but Catherine as well, because you're working in an organisation that's not traditionally known for tech, but you need tech to function. What sort of particular challenge does that give you?
Well, the opportunity that we have is actually the skills that we need more so of to complement the tech skills are very much around those people skills and the analytical skills, and that's what we are superb at. We are a people serving people business, so actually we've got those skills in abundance. In terms of the tech skills, we need to look at different parts of the business. So there will be certain elements of the business that the skill requirement is really high because in terms of our innovation as an organisation, we have a whole innovation lab which is all about identifying new and creative interventions digitally that can improve the guest experience. So that is a huge piece, and I think as an organisation within our sector, we are really leading the way. So the first to do so many things from a technical perspective, way back from the first to organise a hotel to put a TV in a bedroom. So that is something that's constantly moving. But you're right in terms of the digital skill level of our operational team members. That can be limited, but it certainly always changes. And also because of our learning interventions, we've had e-learning within our business as it was in its pure sense nearly 20 years ago. So actually from a concept perspective, team members are familiar with going to a PC and doing some e-learning, especially around the mandatory stuff.
Is that aspirational then within your organisation to become part of technology? Is that seen as a great route to take as a next step? If you can get into labs, if you can get away from that, is that seen as a route?
It's a good question. It's seen as quite a difficult route because, of course, it is such a transition in terms of the whole skill set that somebody needs, going from an operation into that environment. What we've got in terms of opportunity, and in answer to your previous question, in the UK, we have a great opportunity with the apprenticeships now, where we can be introducing individuals into functions or into specialism areas as an apprentice that they will have never have experienced that before. So that's an ideal platform to really take somebody from not being competent to being competent.
And so, Julian, in IBM, you've been doing this for more than, 50, 60 years. So tech recruitment...
A year of its history.
Yeah. Tech recruitment, really easy? Not a problem?
Never a problem. But if I could step up from this a little, because I think we fear this every time we're at the end of one and the beginning of another era. Technology has advanced perpetually for eons, from ploughs to printing presses to, and onwards and onwards. And yes, it's accelerated, and yes, it's diverse, but actually humanity has an innate ability to educate itself as it goes through that process. Yes, we need to take a look back through the talent pipeline to our educational system to make sure that our children and our children's children are equipped. However, about a decade ago, consumer technology overtook enterprise technology. It was called the mobile phone. We are all, as human beings, much more familiar with the digital skills that we need in the workplace as a consequence anyway. I think we're becoming a bit frightened by the new era that we're entering, the cognitive era, where AI, machine learning, and other technologies are becoming more predominant. But look, let's face it, in the last decade, we've gone through the e-commerce era. We lived it. The dot-com boom and bust, e-commerce, digital, mobile, now cognitive, in a decade. We have these skills innately. I think where I would see organisational focus is around value and purpose, and new operating models for organisations that breed a culture of teamwork, where a fusion of technology, digital, data, and cognitive skills can be brought to bear on persistent problems, but equally on persistent performance improvement. And so when you take an organisation from one side of a transformation to another, the next thing that happens is that the people that went on that journey together become the new operational norm, and that they've picked up those skills as a consequence of working together. They've got new cultural associations with the technologies that they've invested in. People pick this stuff up naturally. My son plays Fortnite like everybody else's teenage children. Who doesn't have a teenage child that plays Fortnite? I mean, Charlie will complain royally when his FPS measure, which is frames per second, is killed by his sister's iPad, who's watching YouTube. He inherently knows that he is limited in his ability to do stuff because of a technology that he doesn't truly understand, but he understands it a lot better than my dad. And so we are naturally, I suspect, educating ourselves as we go through this process. But there are points in every enterprise journey, organisationally, where you do have a shortfall, you need to augment it, and you need to accelerate the competency within the organisation. And that's about a purposefulness in terms of education.
Okay. So Diana, that's where you come in, surely, is
yeah,
where...
exactly.
Bring that on.
That's a tricky one, as in, because I think that's, what an education system has always been for, to actually make people ready for what happens next. It's all well and good to be educating people for, you need to be able to do this right now, and that's important. But actually, things change all the time. And we've been referring to our children as, we go to them for help with technology, but they will be going to their children for help with technology. We have no idea of what that technology will be. I think we're in a sense of a bit of a transition era with higher education where we have had a bit of a tendency to talk about what you want to be, and we'll make you what you are supposed to be. And of course, in these sorts of conversations, that's very clear. It doesn't work like that. And that also goes back to, it was one of my frustrations with the secondary school that my children went through, as in, what are you going to be? What are you going to study? While it actually ought to be about, the joy of learning, the engagement. What are you actually trying to improve? How are you going to make the world a better place? And what's your role going to be in making the world a better place? That will make the children go, but also, all our colleagues.
I'm surprised, I think, that we think that digital natives give us a good enough starting basis in education as a starting point. I completely see your point that they're excellent users of tech, but what I'm interested in is how we get them, pique that interest to get them to take that next step.
I agree, but I'll use Charlie again as an example. He's an avid Fortnite player. He also found something called Blinkbox, which is an online games creation platform. It's a very visual thing, and you can drag and drop stuff and create mobile games in an instant. His inventiveness, his creativity is being explored by him using a very basic set of technologies. He's not yet asked for a Raspberry Pi, but he will at some point. Mm-hmm. This is just the inquisitiveness of a child. However, I think we all continue to have, as human beings, an opportunity to be inquisitive if we are given such opportunity in the workplace. And I'll bring it back to the purpose of the conversation. If the opportunity is not given in the workplace, fear of the unknown will persist. And so you've got to create organisational opportunities to put people in front of, through exposure and education, new frontiers of technology. If the opportunity doesn't exist, fear will persist.
Yeah.
And so organisationally, we have to address the way in which we deal with that.
I guess I'd say with Blinkbox and other of those games, I don't want to go down the Luciano methodology of just scaring the bejesus out of everyone, but there's a certain way that you can use those sorts of, have these incredibly sophisticated cases of grooming on using some of those creative platforms for being able to get to kids and things like that. So, and that's where I think it's quite good to take that experience, that ability to use stuff, but apply some of the learning and other interventions that then make them excellent. They can apply that learning as well into your work programs.
Fantastically simple examples I've seen in retail. Retail is one of these places where something like 20% of the working population has a relationship to retail. We either work in it or we serve it. Massively relevant, therefore, to talk about it. How do you get a digital community built in retail? Well, give them a go. Yeah. One of the things that people are very proud of in retail is the knowledge they have about the products that they sell. They like to share best practice. They like to create a dialogue. They like to be able to talk to each other. If you've got 160,000 people spread across the nation, how do you get everybody that is really passionate about baking, talking? Yeah. You create a digital platform, you let them talk. All of a sudden you get this flourishing community of bakers who are prepared to share best practice. You publish it, you create media channels internally and externally. All of a sudden you've created digitally native bakers.
Well, I'm interested in, you take that same model and start ripping up the rule book with other things like gift-gaff and how you provide technology service around mobile phones. What do we think, and support, customer service support essentially in that case? What do we think about government intervention then? If I start back with Catherine around this idea for apprenticeships, we know there's a certain amount of emerging talent, sort of digital native, but how do you take that to the next level? Do you think the apprenticeships and the levy have been successful in their implementation?
Yes, I think where they've been managed effectively, yes, they have, and where sectors have got their heads around it, then absolutely they've benefited from that as they were set out to do. I do think that there's a bigger piece around this, and it's about taking the change that we're talking about in terms of the work itself, so breaking the jobs down and the whole job design and the elements of it that are and are not automatable, as an example, and there's also a need to take the actual workforce as well. So what does that workforce of the future look like? So it's not a workforce of full and part-time employees anymore. You know, the other extreme is the crowds. You know, I will put a task out there, and you know, somebody will come back to me to do that task. No employment contract, nothing, and we're on that path now, when we're not that far away from that crowd workforce. And then, of course, in addition to that, it's the workplace. So we've gone from having that physical workplace to physical meetings and physical interactions, to having the physical workplace and the virtual interactions, which is where we kind of are now, to undoubtedly have the virtual workplace and the virtual interactions. So I think there's a much bigger piece to this. And one thing that just kept going through my mind all the time as the other panellists were talking was, this is about lifelong learning. That's what it is. It's lifelong learning for everyone.
Do you have a culture that backs that up? Do you think that that's something that people go and experience within your organisation? Because we don't have, it's not as if there's loads of people waiting for digital jobs at the job centre, right?
Yeah.
We've got to find, develop and build them ourselves, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, we have a culture within Hilton where, unless as a team member I'm healthy in my mind, body and spirit, then I'm not going to perform to my best. So actually the interventions that we have as an organisation are built around that. And it could be that actually, you know, from a digital perspective, I want to take myself off in my lunch hour, and actually I want to sit and I want to have a game of Fortnite or whatever it might be. And it's about providing whatever that individual needs for them to be healthy in their mind, body and spirit.
Okay.
I would actually say that some of that government investment, so recently the Institute of Technology investment bids came through, and back in Swindon, so Nationwide's head office is Swindon, Wiltshire, and that government investment in the local area will change the entire community, physically change the community in terms of investment in the physical infrastructure of Swindon College, supported the bringing together of a set of discrete demand across industries, but actually when you think about the skills, the skills are digital skills, they're data skills. When I think about the courses we're going to put on, okay, it's React for front end, it's Node for back end, it's an API centric. Actually, there's a relatively high commonality of the skill set that we're going to try and get into these new T-level candidates. And when you then think about you're bringing together in communities supply and demand, so we're going to actively try and target a steady supply with known demand from a cross-industry group that would include a Dyson and a Nationwide and small bespoke individual organisations as well, with a common sense of understanding that the investment of our time as industry in those colleges to support the growth of individuals for T-levels will then supply an engaged, effective, continuous learning-minded. I'm really, really looking forward to it, because I think that will quite genuinely change a local community. And that, times by 20 across the UK, if done well, is a massive difference, will make a huge difference at local society level, therefore UK.
And do you think that's, within Nationwide specifically, do you think that's backed up, that mindset is prevalent in the leadership team at board level within Nationwide? Do you think that's what
So I think
they see the capability challenge in those terms?
The fascinating thing in that is near-term delivery pressures versus long-term capability growth. And I'm having that conversation right at board level at the moment. So I know that I can go to third parties, some of whom are even sitting on the panel, and I can ask them to help me do things, and they will do an excellent job. I can also invest the time in growing my own internal capability, and they will over time establish a flow and a velocity and will become the workforce of the future. One is a medium-term play, one is a near-term play. And the unfortunate reality is that those near-term pressures, the urgent versus the important investment, becomes a real discussion. But yet actually, for an organisation who aren't owned by, therefore, shareholders with investment returns, you can invest in building society. And I do genuinely think that up at board level, there is a recognition that retraining opportunities to create an inclusive workforce that is therefore able to create and innovate and represent society, I do think that's there, but I think that's quite fortunate because of our composition and our member base.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. And there are organisations I've worked with and for who have taken a mid to long-term view and have said we will do this more slowly than our competitors because we are going to create for ourselves an enduring capability along the journey. Particularly John Lewis, where we very deliberately brought together a fusion of external expertise internal knowledge and competence and existing IT and tech teams, and brought those together across a period of many years, in fact, to drive a new capability, recognising that the third-party skills were only really a catalyst.
Yeah. You might argue
we didn't want to be entirely and perpetually dependent upon
third parties.
We wanted the competencies ourselves. Now, did it take a little longer than had we bought in skills? Of course it did. But it's a trade between value long term, isn't it?
Yeah, you might argue that government digital service was an attempt to reverse a policy of 15 years, which was outsourcing within the public sector. But you might not.
You now look at GDS, if you think in that period where central government invested heavily in the larger systems integrators, actually the creation of government digital services, I now go to GDS and I learn from them. And having sat on the Accenture side of that, being one of the large SIs at that period, actually the introduction to GDS has been beneficial, not just in that context, but actually, again, I now go back as a retail financial services player and learn from where GDS have taken.
Yeah. Kathy, how does this scale? How does this work with a smaller sort of corporate body?
I would say it's probably easier with a smaller team. So from that perspective, I think it's really a different sphere, and obviously we work really closely with some of our university colleagues as well in terms of bringing in new skills and giving them work experience and making sure that they're able to apply what they're learning in a real environment with real businesses, and that's the most, it's a really big benefit. There's one final point I would say, that obviously having worked with lots and having been on the other side, I think one of the biggest challenges that there is, it's not so much the younger teams that are coming up and the digital skills and the understanding, it's actually educating the board that technology touches everybody, because it touches HR, it's no longer just IT sitting in the corner as a service function. Everybody can do analytics and drag and drop, and it's so much easier now to do bits that actually the board have to have, as much as they have to have an understanding of numbers. One of my CTOs said everyone needs to have an understanding of technology and how it enables the business. And it's not a fear factor. It's about how it really can drive and shift change.
Okay. Diana, you probably see these as people come through and go through the process with your Oxford Brookes, see some of these trends in absolute clarity. Do you concur with these sorts of things?
It's really mixed, but I think it's a mixed experience for various organisations as well. Both sort of on the undergraduate programme, now you would not think that some of these are digital natives.
Okay.
You sort of there's quite a lot of them. Yes, they can do their Facebook and WhatsApp and whatnot, but the moment you challenge them a little bit more and think about it in an organisational context, they go, "No, I don't do tech." Okay. And that's still ongoing. And I'm still totally puzzled by that, because you'd think, as in, look, can you not see how much it's impacting your own life and how you could take that forward and take your own understanding forward? So a lot of what we do there is indeed actually try to take them that step up and say, well, whether or not you think you're tech, you ought to be, because whatever you're going to do, whatever job you're going to have through a lifetime, that is going to just change, and the way you do your work is going to be very technology enabled, augmented. I know we educate quite a lot of accountants, and
good luck.
A whole lot there is we tell them welcome to the club, and there might not be any need for accountants as we know it for much longer.
That's a great opening gambit with the
How are we going to make you ready for that?
Yeah.
And I think that's again back to that. This is, a lot of education is about learning to learn, and developing the skills that you can apply immediately, and then.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal perspective, I think the apprenticeship, as a principle, apprenticeships are a brilliant means to education, because I'm a firm believer that doing is the best way of learning. Absolutely. And given the opportunity, and I do come back to the point I made earlier, organisations need to create space for people to have a go and be involved in things that expose them to things that they are inherently fearful of until they see and touch and feel and experience the act of doing. And learning is a doing thing. Ultimately, you can take that ability to learn and apply it, but the best way of learning about something is to do something with it. And I've very purposely brought together teams where your knowledge, my skills, brought together and great stuff happens.
Yeah.
And examples in very small scale where AI has been applied to things like price optimization in retail. How do you reduce the amount of discount you give? You take a huge data set from history, you take a merchandiser and a buyer, you stick them in a room with a technologist, and good stuff happens. And they become less fearful of the fact that there's this machine that's going to take my job.
Well, that's a digital
this machine
team.
is not going to take your job. You've got knowledge, it's got skills.
Yeah. So Catherine, we're back to you, because it seems that your labs, as you started with, was the solution. So that's quite you can take that away and say that was definitely the point. So
I think we're in very different places, and I think when people say that they're not techie, actually I don't think they realise that they are techie. And if I think about the job roles within our organisation, you know, how we set our prices is based on tech information. How what we sell is based on that feedback, and all our forecasting is based on that kind of data. So actually we're using it around us all the time, and I think people just don't recognise that. But I do think that we are on such a massive curve in terms of one extreme to the other, and I think there will be organisations, particularly SMEs, who will be sitting in this environment in 10 or 20 years' time, still not having moved on.
Yeah.
Because if they're not touching it, then they're not going to experience it.
Well, I think every organisation, whether they're large or small, needs to understand that if digital teaches us anything, it's what made us successful in the past won't make us successful in the future. So we need to sort of get up to speed with that and do something about it, certainly around capability. Now, this thing keeps going red. Does that mean someone's trying to tell me? Yes. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for taking the time out this afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you.